Hi, I'm Virgil. You won't believe what I found on my husband's phone, his playlist with her voice. And when I played it at my mom's birthday, my aunt looked at me and asked, "Is that you?" The truth hit harder than I could ever imagine, but what came next was even worse. I thought I knew him, but what he did to me was beyond betrayal. How long have they been hiding this from me? And why does it feel like my family has been lying to my face all along? Hook 2. Do you ever wonder how much you really know the people you love? I found a voice on my husband's playlist, an old friend he's been hiding. But when my aunt caught me, everything spiraled. My family tried to keep me in the dark for years, and the more I uncovered, the worse it got. I could have walked away, but what happened next will make you question everything. How far would you go to expose the truth? The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the kitchen counter. I stood by the coffee machine, waiting for the familiar hiss of the coffee brewing. Vince was still asleep, his breathing soft and steady in the bedroom down the hall. I had already been awake for over an hour, mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quite control. I used to cherish these quiet moments, just me and the soft hum of the house. But today, the silence felt oppressive, like a weight pressing against my chest. My hand shook slightly as I poured the steaming coffee into my favorite mug. Lately, I'd been feeling distant. There were times when I looked at Vince and didn't recognize the man beside me anymore. The warmth between us had cooled, replaced by a quiet tension I couldn't explain. Maybe I was just imagining it. Maybe I was overthinking things, like I always did. But something inside me kept whispering that something was wrong. Vince had been different lately, distant even when he was physically present. I tried to push the thoughts aside, tried to pretend everything was fine, but it was hard to ignore the truth that kept nagging at me. The little things were adding up, and I could feel the cracks forming beneath the surface of our relationship. I sipped my coffee, looking out the window at the quiet suburban street. Everything seemed so normal, so peaceful, yet my mind was anything but. Vince had been coming home late more often, and when he was around, he was either glued to his phone or lost in his own world. I hadn't confronted him about it, not yet. But the unease was growing, like a shadow following me everywhere I went. The ringing of my phone pulled me from my thoughts. It was just a reminder to pick up some groceries. I put the phone back down, my eyes drifting over to Vince's phone on the counter. It wasn't unusual for him to leave it lying around, and part of me felt guilty for even considering going through it. But I had to know, had to find out if my suspicions were justified. I told myself it was just a quick look. I wasn't going to snoop through his messages or anything. I just needed to find the phone number of the guy he'd been talking about last week, the one he mentioned while on the phone, the one I'd never heard of before. I felt a strange mix of guilt and curiosity as I picked up the phone. I unlocked it with ease. He never bothered to set a passcode. Scrolling through his contacts, I couldn't find the name. So I opened his music app, thinking I'd check if the guy's name might be listed there. But what I found instead made my blood run cold. It was a playlist. The name of the playlist was simple: Her Voice. At first I felt confused. I didn't recognize the title, and there was no context to it. I clicked on the playlist, half expecting to find something unremarkable, but as soon as the audio began to play, I felt my breath catch in my throat. A woman's voice came through the speakers, soft, intimate, almost affectionate. The voice was talking about Vince. She spoke about him like they were close, too close. It wasn't just a casual mention. The way she spoke, the words she used, it felt like something more, something that shouldn't have been happening. My heart hammered in my chest. I stopped the audio, my hands trembling. I didn't know what I was hearing, but I knew it wasn't right. Was this some kind of joke? Or was Vince seeing someone else? The weight of the thought hit me hard, and I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, spiraling into a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and disbelief. I hit play again, hoping that maybe I'd misunderstood. But no. The voice on the playlist was still there, still talking about him in ways that were far too personal. The betrayal was so clear, so real, that I could feel it deep in my bones. My thoughts were all over the place. Part of me wanted to confront him right then and there, but I didn't know how. I wasn't ready for that, wasn't prepared to face whatever the truth might be. Instead, I sat there, frozen in place. I stared at the phone in my hands, listening to the woman's voice, hearing Vince's name over and over again. It was too much to process all at once. My mind screamed for answers, but all I could do was listen in silence, hoping for some kind of explanation that made sense. After what felt like an eternity, I hit pause and put the phone back down on the counter. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. I had so many questions, but no answers. I knew I couldn't just leave it like this. I had to confront him, but I couldn't do it now, not yet. The truth I had uncovered was too much for me to handle in one moment. The weight of it pressed on my chest, and I realized that I wasn't just upset, I was heartbroken. Vince had betrayed me, and I didn't even know how to begin dealing with it. I walked over to the window again, my gaze fixed on the quiet street outside. The world seemed the same, but inside, everything had changed. I didn't know how I was going to handle what I had just discovered. The betrayal, the uncertainty, it all felt like too much to bear. But I had to face it. I had to find the courage to confront Vince, even if I didn't know how. The scent of roasted chicken and freshly baked bread filled the air as I stepped into my mother's house. The warmth of the home was inviting, but it felt hollow today. Vince had been distant for weeks, and my discovery that morning only deepened the chasm between us. Yet here I was, pretending to smile and greet family members like nothing was wrong. "Virgil, you made it!" My Aunt Linda's voice rang out as she opened the door. Her warm hug was meant to be comforting, but I barely felt it. I gave a tight smile, nodding. "Yeah, just barely." I tried to sound upbeat, but my words felt forced. Around me, the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air as everyone settled into their seats at the long dining table. The chatter flowed easily, with my cousins discussing their latest school projects and Aunt Linda bragging about her garden. Vince, however, sat at the far end, quietly chatting with my father, completely unaware of the storm that had already begun to brew inside me. As I moved to sit next to Vince, I couldn't help but feel detached, as though I was observing my own life from a distance. I had just uncovered something that shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage, and here I was, surrounded by family, trying to act normal. It was a strange kind of torture, pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. The food was set before us, and we began to eat, but I barely tasted anything. My mind kept replaying the voice on Vince's phone, over and over again. That woman, her voice, the things she said, how had I been so blind? I forced myself to pay attention to the conversation, smiling and nodding where appropriate, but the words felt empty. Everything felt like a blur, like I was moving through life on autopilot. My aunt kept talking, her voice barely registering as I tried to focus on anything but the gnawing anxiety inside me. But it wasn't just the discomfort of the situation. It was the weight of knowing the truth now, the betrayal that hung between us like a thick, suffocating fog. Just as I thought I might be able to push the thoughts away for a while, Aunt Linda leaned in, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "Virgil," she began, lowering her voice as if sharing some kind of secret. "I heard something funny the other day. Vince has been listening to this playlist on his phone." She glanced at me, her smile faltering when she noticed my expression freeze. "You ever heard of it? It's called Her Voice." I froze. The blood drained from my face. The words hit me like a slap. My heart stopped, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I stared at Aunt Linda, trying to process what she had just said. Her words lingered in the air, like they were pulling me deeper into the pit of my own anxiety. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. The tension that had been simmering inside me for weeks now exploded in my chest. I felt like I was drowning, and yet I couldn't bring myself to react. Aunt Linda's eyes were bright with excitement, oblivious to the internal chaos she had just unleashed. "I just thought it was so funny," she continued, "because it sounds like someone is talking about Vince. You know, really personal stuff. You ever heard it?" I didn't know what to say. My heart hammered in my chest, and I was certain everyone around the table could hear it. My mind was racing, the shock of it all still too fresh to fully process. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront Vince right there, in front of everyone, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not in front of all these people. For a moment, the room felt too small. The laughter, the casual conversations, Everything seemed to blur into the background as I sat there, unable to respond. My breath felt shallow, and my hands shook as I gripped the edge of my plate. My aunt was still talking, but I couldn't hear her anymore. All I could hear was the voice from the playlist, the intimate words that echoed in my ears. "Virgil? That you?" My Aunt Linda's voice sliced through the fog. She had asked me again, this time with a hint of concern, as if something about my reaction had caught her attention. The question hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment I thought I might suffocate from the pressure. The truth was out there now, hanging between us, and I had to face it. But how? How could I face it here, in front of my family, with no idea what to say? I forced a smile, but it felt like a mask that was barely holding together. "I don't know," I muttered, trying to brush it off. "Maybe. I don't know." The words came out too quickly, too defensively. I could see the concern in Aunt Linda's eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to address it. Not yet. I excused myself from the conversation, my mind racing. The room seemed to close in on me as I tried to steady my breathing. I couldn't stay here, not while the truth was gnawing at me from the inside. I had to confront Vince, but not here, not in front of everyone. I looked at him across the table. He was laughing, his hand resting casually on his glass of wine, completely unaware of the storm inside me. He looked so normal. It was almost maddening. How could he act so casually when I knew what I knew? But I knew I couldn't confront him now, not in front of my family, not in the middle of this dinner. I would wait, I would watch, and when the time was right, I would make him face the truth. The night dragged on, the laughter and chatter filling the air, but I was lost in my own thoughts, my resolve growing stronger with every passing minute. I would confront him later. I didn't know when, but it would happen, and when it did, there would be no turning back. The air in our living room felt heavier than usual as I stood there, the evidence of Vince's betrayal weighing down on my chest. I had spent the entire day thinking about what I had found, but it was time to face him. I couldn't hide from the truth anymore. The silence in the room felt like a trap, and Vince, sitting comfortably on the couch, had no idea what was coming. "Vince, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, but laced with a tension I couldn't shake. He looked up at me, his brow furrowing as if confused by the sudden seriousness in my tone. "What about?" "I know about the playlist," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, despite the storm brewing inside me. For a moment, Vince didn't say anything. His expression was blank, his eyes betraying nothing. Then, just as I had expected, he sat up straighter, his face shifting to one of defensive calm. "That's nothing," he replied quickly, almost too quickly. "Just an old friend." "You're reading too much into it." I could feel my pulse quicken, the anger rising in my throat. "An old friend? Really? Vince, I heard her voice, talking about you. In a way, no friend talks to another friend." His eyes darted away for a moment, and then he shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "It's just a mistake, Virgil. You know how it is. People talk. It's nothing." I stared at him, my mind reeling. He was lying. I could feel it in my gut, but his charm, his calm demeanor, it was all so convincing. For a moment, I almost doubted myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was just letting my emotions get the best of me. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that something was off. "I'm not an idiot, Vince," I said, my voice tightening with each word. "I know when I'm being lied to. Don't do this." He exhaled sharply, his shoulders sagging as if he was trying to summon the right words. "Virgil, please, you're being paranoid. Nothing happened. Just let it go, okay?" I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but I fought to keep it in check. "No, Vince, I won't let it go. Not this time." He was still trying to manipulate the situation, to gaslight me into thinking I was imagining things. He had always been good at that, convincing me that my feelings were wrong, that I was the one who had the problem. But now, I could see through it. His words didn't have the same power over me anymore. I wasn't going to let him talk me out of my own reality. But the way he spoke, so casually, so dismissively, made something inside me snap. It was as though he didn't even care about the pain he had caused me. "I don't care about your excuses, Vince," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "You've been lying to me for months, and I can't pretend I don't know anymore." He opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand, cutting him off. Don't. I'm done with the lies. I heard everything I needed to hear. He looked at me, his face full of frustration, and then he did the one thing that drove me to my breaking point. He accused me of overreacting. You're overreacting, Virgil. You're blowing this out of proportion. This is all in your head. I felt a sickening wave of anger wash over me. My hands clenched into fists, and I could barely control my breathing. This was exactly what he had always done, make me feel like I was crazy, make me question my own instincts. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me. I'm not crazy, Vince, I said, my voice shaking with the intensity of my emotions. I know what I heard, I know what's happening, and I won't sit here and let you deny it anymore. He stood up then, and for a moment, I thought he might try to leave the room. But instead, he just stood there, his eyes searching mine, his jaw tight. Virgil, he started, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Please, don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built over some misunderstanding. I took a deep breath, my chest tightening as I looked at him. It's not a misunderstanding, Vince. I'm done pretending. I know what you've been hiding. The room felt colder suddenly, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. But I knew that this conversation wasn't over. Not yet. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to know. But the truth was already clear in my mind. He had lied to me, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. But I wasn't done yet. I needed more. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to hear him admit it. I couldn't just let him tell me everything was fine, that this was all some mistake. I need proof, I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. I need you to admit it. Not just tell me some story, Vince. I need to see the truth. All of it. He looked at me for a long moment, his face hardening. What do you want me to say? You're making a scene over nothing. I shook my head, my anger rising again. You're the one who made this a scene, Vince, not me. I didn't want this. But now, I'm not backing down. The tension between us was suffocating, but I knew what had to come next. I needed to find the evidence that would prove what I already knew. I needed to force him to admit the truth. I couldn't keep living in this lie. I turned away from him, my mind racing. The reality of the situation was settling in. This wasn't just about the playlist or the affair. This was about my entire marriage, my trust, my dignity, and I wasn't going to let him take that from me anymore. As I walked out of the room, my thoughts were already set on the next step. I needed to find the truth, and once I had it, Vince wouldn't be able to deny it. The air in the house was thick, heavy with the tension that had been building up since the night I discovered the truth. Vince had been acting like everything was fine, as if nothing had changed, but I knew better. My heart was still racing from the conversation earlier. It had ended, but the storm inside me was far from over. Sitting in the living room, I felt like a different person. The Virgil that had once believed in this marriage, that had loved and trusted Vince, seemed so far away now. The woman sitting here now was someone broken, someone who had seen the truth behind the facade, and she wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. I watched Vince, sitting on the couch across from me, pretending to be engrossed in his phone, avoiding eye contact. It was like he thought if he didn't acknowledge what was happening, it would just go away. But I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't pretend. Vince, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth, like they were coming from someone else, someone stronger. We need to talk, for real. He looked up, his face momentarily surprised, before he quickly masked it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What about? I heard the playlist, I said, letting the words hang in the air, the weight of them undeniable. For a moment, there was silence. Then he scoffed, his eyes narrowing. That? Really, you're still on that? Yes, I'm still on that, I snapped, anger rising in my chest. Who is she, Vince? He shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair. You're overreacting. It's nothing, just an old friend. A mistake, okay? A mistake. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. It was always the same. A mistake, a simple slip-up. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Not after everything I had uncovered. Don't insult me, I said, my voice calm, but the fury simmering beneath the surface. I don't need you to lie to me anymore. His calm demeanor cracked for a moment, but he quickly recovered. You're making something out of nothing. It was a stupid thing, okay? Just drop it. No. The word came out more forcefully than I intended, but I couldn't help it. I had to stop him. I won't drop it. You've been lying to me, Vince. For how long? Months? Years? His face twisted in annoyance, his shoulders tensing as if he was preparing for a fight. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to hurt you. Then why did you do it? I asked, my voice shaking now, not from fear but from the weight of the truth that was crashing down on me. Why lie? Why betray me? I was confused, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. It didn't mean anything. I wasn't thinking straight. I felt my blood run cold. He was trying to manipulate me, just like he always had, trying to make me feel sorry for him, like he was the victim here. But it wasn't going to work. Not anymore. You weren't thinking straight? I repeated, my voice rising with incredulity. Is that what you think this is? A little mistake? An oops moment? He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I made a mistake, okay? Can't you just forgive me? Forgive you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've been lying to me for who knows how long, and you think I'm just going to forgive you? He tried to reach out to me, his hand hovering in the air like he was going to touch me, but I pulled back. No, Vince. No more lies. No more excuses. The room fell silent again, and for a moment, I felt like I was drowning in the weight of the conversation. His words, his pleas, were just noise now. They didn't matter. Nothing he said could undo the betrayal. And then it hit me. I had spent so long questioning myself, wondering if I was overreacting, if I was just being paranoid. But now, with the truth laid out in front of me, I knew. Vince wasn't the man I had married. He wasn't the man I thought I knew. He was someone else, someone who had lied to me and deceived me. I stood up suddenly, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't stay in that room another second, not with him still trying to twist everything. I needed space. I needed time to think. Where are you going? Vince asked, his voice sounding almost desperate now. I'm leaving, I said, walking toward the door. I need to think. I need to figure out what comes next. But this marriage, it's over. He opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't wait. I didn't care anymore. I walked out, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do now? How had it come to this? All those years, all that trust, shattered in an instant. As I stepped outside, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. Not anymore. I had to take control of my life again. For so long, I had allowed Vince to dictate the terms of our marriage, but not anymore. I would find a way out. I would find a way to reclaim my dignity. The living room felt colder now. The silence in the house was oppressive, as if the very walls knew that everything had changed. I sat on the couch, the evidence in my hands, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment of truth had arrived, and I was ready to face it. I had been through hell, but I was still standing. Vince thought he could keep lying to me, but he was wrong. I wasn't that woman anymore, the one who believed in his lies. I was stronger now. I took a deep breath, the weight of what I was about to do settling in. Confronting Vince was one thing, but the real challenge was how I would handle what came next. The emotional turmoil that had been consuming me for weeks had finally started to fade. I wasn't consumed by anger anymore, though it still simmered beneath the surface. No, now I felt a sense of calm, of clarity. I wasn't just reacting. I was planning. I was taking control. As I sat there, my mind flashed back to a moment from my childhood. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for my parents to come home. They never showed up, not that night, not the next day. I felt abandoned then, just like I felt now. But back then, I didn't have the strength to stand up for myself. I was a child, helpless. Now, I was an adult, and I would never let anyone make me feel small again. I stood up, holding the evidence tight in my hands. I was ready. This time, Vince wasn't going to manipulate me. I was going to take control of my life. I walked into the kitchen where Vince was pacing. His eyes flicked up at me, startled, but quickly returned to the floor, unwilling to meet my gaze. The once familiar comfort of our home now felt like a battlefield. His nervous energy only made the tension heavier, but I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. "Vince," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the fear I still felt. "We need to talk." He stopped pacing, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like forever. "You what now?" he asked, his voice defensive, as though he were trying to prepare himself for something. "I've had enough of your lies," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I know about the affair, Vince. I know what you've been doing." His face went pale, and for a moment I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes, but then he quickly masked it with that same smooth charm. "You're overreacting," he said quickly, his voice laced with feigned calmness. "It was a mistake, just a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything." I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. "A mistake? You've been lying to me for months, and that's your excuse. You didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. Instead, you kept pretending everything was fine, pretending like I was the crazy one." His calm facade was slipping, but he tried to recover. "I wasn't thinking straight. I was confused. You didn't understand me, Virgil. You were too busy with everything else. I was looking for something." "Anything." "Something?" I echoed. "You were looking for something outside of our marriage? And now you want me to believe it was all just a mistake?" He stepped forward, a pathetic attempt to close the distance between us. "Virgil, please," he said softly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You know I love you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't know how to fix things. I was confused." I looked at him, my eyes cold and unblinking. "No, Vince, you weren't confused. You were selfish. You chose this. And now you want me to forgive you for it?" His eyes widened slightly, the guilt creeping into his expression. But instead of the apology I expected, he tried to shift the blame. "Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, this wouldn't have happened. I needed you, and you were never there. You've always been too busy with work, with everything else." The words felt like a slap in the face, each one cutting deeper than the last. I felt the anger rise within me again, but I knew I couldn't let it control me. I was done being manipulated, done with the gaslighting. "I was there for you," I said, my voice quieter now, controlled. "I gave you everything. But you wanted more, didn't you? You wanted something I couldn't give you. So you went looking for it elsewhere." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "No more excuses, Vince. You've made your choice. And now I'm making mine." The words felt final, like a door slamming shut. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his excuses. I had nothing left to fear. I turned away from him and headed toward the door. He called out behind me, but I didn't turn back. "Virgil, don't do this. We can fix this. We can—" "No," I interrupted. "It's over. I deserve more than this. And you don't get to control me anymore." I stepped out into the cool night air, feeling the weight of everything that had happened slowly lifting. The quiet felt different now, not oppressive, but peaceful. I had made the decision, and there was no going back. As I walked down the street, my mind cleared. I thought about the future, about what came next. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly in control. I wasn't going to let this man or the life we'd built together dictate my future anymore. I was going to rebuild, one step at a time. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was finally ready to walk it. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with anticipation. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. Vince stood across from me, shifting nervously, trying to keep the calm facade he had worked so hard to maintain. But I saw through it all. He knew this time was different. He knew I wasn't the same woman he had lied to for so long. He could feel it, the shift in power. The game was over. Virgil, please, Vince started, his voice strained, but I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses anymore. I wasn't here to listen to more of his lies. I was done. This ends tonight, I said, my voice low and controlled. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. There was no going back now. He took a step toward me, his face twisting in confusion and panic. What do you mean? I know I've messed up, but we can fix this, okay? We can work through this. I met his gaze, unwavering. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way I used to be. This wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about reclaiming what I had lost. It was about me taking back my power. Fix this. You think you can fix this? You think a few words can undo everything you've done? Vince opened his mouth, but the words he tried to muster just didn't come. He realized then that I wasn't the woman I had been. The woman who would sit silently, nursing wounds too deep to speak about. No, I had grown, changed, and I wasn't afraid anymore. He exhaled sharply, trying to gather his thoughts. Virgil, come on, don't overreact. It was just a moment of weakness. You know that, right? I was just human. Human? I repeated, feeling the bitterness bubble up. Is that your excuse? You think being human justifies lying, cheating, and betraying the woman who trusted you for years? His face faltered, and for a brief moment I saw the cracks in his armor. But then he straightened up, trying to regain some control. You've been distant, Virgil. You never paid attention to me. You've been so focused on your work, on everything else. I was just trying to feel seen. I laughed, bitter and cold. Seen? Is that how you justify it? By playing the victim? I shook my head. You weren't neglected, Vince. You were just selfish. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the panic in his eyes, his defense crumbling under the weight of my words. But he wasn't ready to give up. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. I swear. I love you, Virgil. I do. But I needed something, and I made a mistake. A big mistake, but it meant nothing. His words were empty. I could hear the desperation in his voice, but they didn't sway me. You don't get to play the victim here, Vince, I said firmly. You don't get to make me feel sorry for you. You've destroyed everything we had. And for what? For a few moments of pleasure? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was saying. You've lied to me, manipulated me, and now you expect me to forgive you? Vince's face darkened, and I saw the mask of calmness slip away entirely. This is bullshit, Virgil, he spat, stepping closer to me. You're overreacting. You're blowing this whole thing out of proportion. I didn't want to hurt you, but you're making this impossible. Do you even realize what you're doing? You're walking away from everything we built together. I stood my ground, refusing to back down. You don't get to guilt-trip me into staying. This marriage? It was built on lies, and I'm done living in a lie. His anger flared as he reached out to grab my arm, but I yanked it away. Don't touch me, I said coldly. You don't have the right anymore. For the first time, I saw a crack in his confidence. He stepped back, his face a mixture of anger and frustration. You really think this is it? You think you can just walk away from everything? I met his gaze, my voice steady yet laced with finality. Yes, Vince, I do. With that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, the sound of his voice fading behind me. But I didn't turn back. I couldn't. I stood alone in the hallway, feeling the weight of the conversation settle into my chest. It wasn't relief that washed over me, not yet. Instead, there was a strange sense of quiet. The storm had passed, but the damage wasn't done. I still had to walk away from him, from everything we'd built together. I couldn't stay. Not for him. Not for anyone. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the quiet press in around me. The house felt hollow, empty, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I could still hear Vince's voice in the background, trying to justify everything. His words were meaningless now. I didn't need him to define me anymore. And then the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. Virgil, a familiar voice said softly on the other end. I'm here for you. I know this is hard, but you've made the right decision. You're stronger than this. I closed my eyes, listening to my friend's comforting words. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared, who saw me for who I was, not who I had become in this relationship. I'm moving on, I whispered to myself, almost as if I needed to hear it out loud. The phone call ended, and I stood up, taking a deep breath. This was it, the beginning of my future. There was no turning back now. And Vince? His shadow would eventually fade. He would no longer control me, no longer haunt my every thought. I walked into the living room, my feet sure and steady as I glanced over the space that once felt like home. Now, it just felt like a place I needed to leave behind. The door was open. I was ready to step through it. I sat on the park bench, the crisp air filling my lungs, but it did nothing to clear the weight pressing down on me. The silence around me seemed deafening, yet it mirrored the storm inside my head. This wasn't a moment of peace, it was a moment of reckoning. I had made it this far, but now, the final decision loomed large. I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. I'd always been the one to try to hold things together. Even now, despite everything, I wondered if I could still make this work. Maybe it wasn't too late. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, the countless moments where Vince had chosen his own selfishness over the marriage we'd built. Could I still stand by him? Or was it time to walk away? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. It was Mia, one of my closest friends, who had been my rock through all of this. Virgil, her voice was soft but firm. You have to make a choice. You've been on the fence for too long. Do you really want to spend the rest of your life doubting yourself? You deserve more than this. Her words hit me like a lightning bolt, and I felt a rush of clarity flood over me. The weight of the decision hadn't lessened, but Mia's voice reminded me that I wasn't just making a choice for the moment. I was choosing my future. Thanks, Mia, I said, my voice steady. I know what I need to do now. The call ended, and I sat there for a few more minutes, the wind rustling through the leaves. The thought of staying with Vince, of keeping this broken marriage alive, felt suffocating. I could almost hear my own voice from years ago, when I had dreamed of love, trust, and peace. The reality now was far from that. I stood up, taking a deep breath as I wiped the tear that had managed to escape. My path was clear. I wouldn't live in fear, regret, or self-doubt anymore. The truth was too heavy to ignore, and it was time to face it head-on. The house felt colder as I walked through the door. Vince was sitting on the couch, his usual calm demeanor nowhere to be found. He knew this moment was coming, but he didn't want to face it. I could see it in his eyes, the panic, the desperation to control the situation once more. But this time, I wasn't going to let him. I took a deep breath, standing tall as I walked into the living room. Vince didn't look up right away, but I could feel the tension building between us. Virgil, he said finally, trying to act as if everything was still normal. I don't understand what's going on. We can fix this, right? We can just talk about it and— No, I interrupted, my voice firm. We can't fix this. Not anymore. His eyes widened in confusion, then a flicker of frustration crossed his face. He stood up, his tone shifting as he tried to regain control. Virgil, please. We've been through so much together. This mistake I made, it doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to destroy everything we've built. His words were hollow. I had heard them 1,000 times before. But this time, I wasn't the woman who would fall for the same old tricks. I'm done, Vince, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. I'm done pretending that everything's okay. I'm done with your lies, your manipulations. You've broken my trust, and I can't keep living like this. Not for you. Not for anyone. Vince stepped back, his face paling as if the ground had been pulled from under him. What are you saying? Are you really going to throw everything away? What about the family? What about us? I've been asking myself that for too long. I replied, feeling the anger surge through me. What about me, Vince? What about what I deserve? You've been taking, and I've been giving, and now I have nothing left to give. His jaw clenched as he tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He was desperate now, trying to pull me back into the cycle of guilt and manipulation. This is just a moment of weakness, he pleaded. You're overreacting. We can make this work. I shook my head slowly, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. No, Vince. This isn't a moment of weakness. This is the end. You don't get to lie to me anymore. You don't get to manipulate me into staying. I'm walking away. His eyes flashed with panic, but I didn't falter. No more second chances. No more lies. I'm done. I left the room, my heart pounding, but with a sense of finality that I hadn't felt before. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of a version of myself that I could no longer be. Back in my apartment, I paced for a while, the quiet of the space feeling both comforting and overwhelming. I had made the choice, but now the reality of it was setting in. I sat down on the couch, my mind racing. The phone rang again, pulling me from my thoughts. It was an old friend, someone who had seen me at my best and my worst. Virgil, I just want to remind you of something, my friend said, their voice steady but warm. You've always had this strength in you. Don't forget that. I let their words settle in, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders, just a little. For the first time in ages, I wasn't carrying the burden of someone else's mistakes. I wasn't trapped in a cycle of guilt and regret. Are you ready to live for yourself now? My friend asked, a simple question that hit me harder than I expected. The answer wasn't easy, but it was clear. I looked at the phone, hesitating for a moment. Then I saw the message from Vince. One last plea for forgiveness. I could feel the temptation to answer, but I wasn't that person anymore. I deleted the message without hesitation. The future was mine to shape now, and I wasn't going to let anyone, take that from me. I stood up, moving toward my desk where a piece of paper sat, empty and waiting. I grabbed a pen and started to write, listing out my goals. What would my future look like? What could I do for myself now? As I wrote, I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't known in years. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to live. The air felt thick as I stood in the living room, the walls heavy with the weight of all that had been said and done. Vince was there, pacing, looking lost, trying to manipulate the space between us. His usual confident demeanor was cracking, replaced by desperation. I could see it, the way his eyes darted from one corner of the room to the next, trying to figure out how to keep control of a situation he could no longer control. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about me, about what I could accept and what I no longer would. I had spent so many years trying to make it work, trying to believe the lies he told me, but no more. He turned to face me, his voice shaking. Virgil, come on. You know this isn't me. I made a mistake, just one mistake. Everyone deserves a second chance, don't they? I let his words sink in for a moment. The same old manipulations, the same excuses. They didn't hit the same way anymore. I wasn't the woman who would fall for it again. No, Vince. You don't get a second chance. Not this time. My voice was steady, my resolve clear. I was done, but he wasn't ready to accept it. You're overreacting. You can't just throw everything away. The family, the kids, our lives. His words fell flat. The family, the kids? Don't you dare bring them into this. I shot back, my anger rising. You destroyed this family with your lies. You've lied to me for years. What about that? What about the man you promised to be? For a moment, there was silence, a deafening quiet that settled between us. I saw his shoulders slump, but it wasn't regret. It was defeat. He could see the truth in my eyes. You were never the man I thought you were, I said, my heart heavy, but my mind clear. This is it, Vince. This ends now. He stood there, speechless, and I didn't look back as I walked away. I had said everything I needed to say. There was nothing more to do here. I stood outside on the porch for a while, letting the cool night air wash over me. The decision had been made, but the weight of it still lingered in my chest. I was free, but I was also uncertain. Was I doing the right thing? Was I strong enough to follow through? I didn't know, but I couldn't keep living the way I had been. I had spent so long wrapped up in someone else's mess that I had forgotten who I was, what I needed. That's when my phone buzzed. I stared at the screen, the name Vince flashing. My heart raced, but I didn't pick up. Instead, I set the phone down on the porch railing and walked away, letting the sound of the wind fill the silence between us. The next day, I found myself at the park, the place where I always went to think, to find peace. Sitting on a bench, I could feel the sun on my face, and I took a deep breath. For the first time in so long, I felt like I could breathe. I glanced at my phone again. There was a message from an old friend. The words were simple, but they hit me harder than I expected. Virgil, you've always had strength. Don't forget it. I hadn't heard from them in years, but reading that message felt like the final piece of the puzzle. I wasn't alone. I didn't need to rely on Vince or anyone else to define my worth. The doubt that had clouded my mind for so long was gone. I was ready to move on. I stood up, feeling the weight of the past fall off my shoulders. I'm ready, I whispered to myself. This is it. A new beginning. The weeks that followed felt surreal. I moved into a new apartment surrounded by empty walls, but they felt like a blank canvas, a fresh start. I unpacked my things slowly, taking in the freedom, the independence I had once taken for granted. As I sat on the couch, scrolling through job opportunities and travel destinations, a message popped up on my screen. It was from Vince. The words were simple. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make it right. Please come back. I stared at the message for a long time, the familiar guilt creeping in. But then, something inside me snapped. I had done this dance before. I had given him every chance, every ounce of my energy, and it was never enough. I deleted the message without a second thought. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to live in the past anymore. I had a future to build. I stood up, grabbed my suitcase, and began packing. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but for the first time, it didn't matter. This was my life, and I was going to live it for me. The evening was quiet, too quiet for someone like me who had just made the biggest decision of her life. I sat in my new apartment, the walls bare and waiting to be filled with new memories. This place was mine alone. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in someone else's baggage, someone else's lies. I was free, and I could finally breathe. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling me from my thoughts. I didn't need to look to know who it was, Vince. It had been a few weeks since our final confrontation, and I had told myself I wouldn't look back, that I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he could still reach me. But there it was, his name flashing on the screen. I stared at the message. My fingers hovered over the screen. He was trying again. Virgil, please. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. Don't leave me. The words were the same, the plea as empty as before. For a brief second, I felt the pull, the old familiar tug to check if maybe this time, it was different. I had been here before. I had heard the same promises, the same lies. This time, I didn't hesitate. I clicked delete. The weight that had been holding me down for so long was gone, just like that. The past was no longer in control. I had made my choice. I was done. I am done with this chapter, I whispered to myself, a sense of finality washing over me. The next morning, the sun was already high, but the air still carried the crispness of early autumn. I had spent so many years feeling trapped, believing that I couldn't move on, that I couldn't find my way out of the maze I had built with Vince. But now, I was standing tall, outside, ready to embrace a new life. As I walked down the street, feeling the freedom in each step, I realized how much I had held on to. Memories, regrets, pain. It wasn't just Vince that I had to let go of. It was everything that had held me back, everything I had let define me for so long. A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Virgil? I turned to see Lisa, a friend from years ago, someone I hadn't seen since before the chaos of my marriage started. Her face held the same warmth, but her eyes told a different story. She looked me over, as if seeing a version of me she hadn't seen in a long time. Wow, it's really you. I didn't expect to see you out here, Lisa said with a soft laugh. I didn't expect to be out here either, I replied, surprised by the ease of the conversation. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, before she spoke again. I heard about what happened. I just want to say, I'm proud of you, Lisa said, her voice genuine. It takes a lot to walk away from something like that. I hope you know, you're stronger than you think. I swallowed, a lump forming in my throat. I hadn't expected this simple, honest acknowledgement from someone who truly understood. It felt like I was being seen for the first time in years. I'm still figuring it out, I said, my voice unsteady, but confident. You've already figured out the most important part, Lisa said with a smile. You're moving forward. That's all that matters. We stood there for a few more moments before parting ways, but I couldn't shake the feeling that, in some small way, meeting Lisa had been exactly what I needed. Later that afternoon, I sat back in my apartment, looking around at the clean, empty space. I had made the choice, and I had taken the first steps toward rebuilding my life. Then, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Vince. I can't do this without you. Please. It was tempting. I knew the pull, the fear of letting go, the fear of the unknown. But then I thought back to the conversation with Lisa, to everything that had happened up until this moment. I wasn't going back. I stood up, feeling the weight of the past slowly fade from me. A new chapter was waiting, one that didn't involve him. I grabbed my keys, my coat, and stepped out the door. I had already said goodbye to the life I thought I wanted. Now it was time to embrace the life I had yet to discover. The message from Vince still lingered on my screen, but I didn't need to reply. I already knew what I was going to do. The days that followed were filled with small, yet significant changes. I found myself making decisions that had once seemed impossible. Applying for new jobs, considering moves, even looking into new places to travel. It was like I was finally seeing the world through a new lens, one where I wasn't afraid to take chances anymore. Then, one evening, a message appeared on my phone. I stared at it, unsure of what to expect. I have an opportunity that might be perfect for you. Let's talk. The message was from someone in a field I'd always dreamed of exploring, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. They offered me a chance to reinvent myself in a way I hadn't imagined. A fresh start. I could feel a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. This was it, the real beginning. I clicked accept without a second thought. This was where the story really started. Packing my suitcase felt surreal. Each fold of clothing, each item that went into my bag was a symbol of my freedom. I had been through so much, and I had learned what I was truly capable of. I was ready for whatever came next. The future was waiting, and I was ready to take it.